you are used to seeing a certain version of yourself, and as you age, those things look different. Like I know that I have felt a sense of grief and loss over, again, nothing tragic, but like, man, I used to love how flat my stomach was, or I used to, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's like, it's okay to feel sad about the fact that I feel bad about those things, but also I feel really proud that this belly housed 3 humans. Like,
Right?
okay, she did a good job.
Yeah.
It's funny because as I was writing the book, I also started writing a blog. And one of the first blogs I wrote was a love letter to my boobs. And if you're a fan of Judy Blume, like I was, I just felt like she was such a seminal writer. The letter and the blog I wrote was like, "Are you there, boobs? It's me, Angela." Because I was really critical of a lot of parts of my body, right? And
Yeah.
I remember in 8th grade, some boy told me my butt was flat, and like that stupid little comment lived in my head for a long time.
Yeah.
But the relationship that I had with my boobs in particular, and my legs or whatever. And then as I wrote this blog, I became acutely aware of, yes, these things look different. Yes, they may not look like everybody else's, but man, you know what? Those legs did a lot of things.
Yeah.
Those legs carried this body with strength through hard periods of time. They helped me bring 3 lives into this world. They walked me into a mediator's office when I and my ex-husband made the decision that we were going to divorce.
Yeah.
This body carried me through a lot of things, so I could mourn
You show up more
changes,
grace. Yeah.
but I have to show myself grace.
Yeah.
And I also don't feel compelled to have to justify
Yeah.
what I do or what I don't do to anybody, and that's a different place, because again, it's just like no, right? No's a full sentence, but for me, I was modeled to, oh, well, I can't do this thing because, I'd have to write a dissertation. I don't feel that same compulsion to have to justify anything anymore. Of course.
Welcome back to Coming Into Focus. I am your host, Helen Tansey, and I am so excited about today's show because today we are going to be talking about midlife, and my guest is Angela Burk, and she has recently written a book called The Real Girl's Guide to Midlife. And what I think I found so intriguing about this book is that it does deal with midlife. And I don't know about you, but when I think of midlife, I often think of it as more of a male thing, where you hear about, a man having a midlife crisis and he gets the sports car and the younger woman. And it's almost like it's acceptable when men go through this, but we don't really hold that space for women. We don't ask women the questions of how are you feeling emotionally, physically, spiritually. And we don't always give women the same space to question their lives, what it is that they want, are they still happy? So we are going to be talking about all of that today. And I also love the idea of that maybe making that shift from it being a midlife crisis to a midlife awakening. And we have Angela here. We're going to be talking about all things midlife. And it is my hope that at the end of this conversation that we can start to feel empowered instead of lost when it comes to midlife. So Angela, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. What a great introduction. There were so many good nuggets in that, like that I had a physical reaction to. Not the least of which is the crisis. Like, man, I remember hearing that though when I was young. Everything was like the midlife crisis.
And it's always referred to as men. Like you never hear about it being referred to from a woman's point of view.
No, you don't. It's such a good point.
Yeah. So I always love to ask my guests before we get into our conversation, do you mind sharing your age?
I don't. I'm 55.
55. And how do you feel about getting older? What does getting older mean to you? What does it feel like?
Well, first of all, I am 19 years younger than my mom. So I remember being in my 20s and my mom being in her 40s and me being in my 30s and my mom being in her 50s. And when I was young, I used to repel against that. I was just like, oof, like I tried to create as much distance as I could from those decades. And honestly, I am so happy where I am in my mid 50s. And I cannot tell you how much I am truly looking forward to my 60s, my 70s, my 80s, because I am a different person. I am coming into these ages with a completely new perspective, and I'm thrilled. So I feel really good. I feel proud of what I've accomplished. I feel strong. I feel determined. I feel powerful, and I'm ready for these next decades. And I'm excited about them. So I'm not repelling against them like I did when I was younger. I am looking forward to them.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I love that. Before I get into more things with you, what is midlife? Like, what is the definition of midlife, the age? Because I always like, is it 40? Is it 50? Like, what is midlife?
I don't think it's any one decade, right? And I think
Okay.
that that's probably a little bit of a misconception that maybe I certainly took away when I was younger. Like I was sort of thinking like, oh, the midlife is, when you hit 35 until you're 50 or whatever. And the real definition that I think is it is just a period of transition.
Okay.
And for me, and for a lot of the women that I spoke to in building the book, it often starts to surface and show itself in our 30s. And it
Really?
kind of carries into our 40s. And I'll give you a really good example of that. So I actually had this book idea when I was 35. And the book was going to be called The Real Girl's Guide to Over 35 because I was at what I view as a crossroads. I was a new mom, so I had 2 kids at this point. I was in a marriage where I was starting to see the cracks, if I'm honest with you. Nothing dramatic, nothing tragic, but I started to sense something. My cycles were changing at this point. So my periods were becoming a less regular and different. I started to notice physical changes about my body. Again, nothing dramatic or tragic, but just like little things. And I was looking around and everybody seemed to have everything together. Everybody was shiny and solid, and I was feeling unsteady. And so I kind of thought it's got to be just me. Like I must be the only one that's not doing this thing right. So for me, that was the first period in my life that I remember feeling sort of this transition. And it wasn't a single transition, right? The career I was kind of at a crossroads there. I was becoming a mom. Like all these things were just shifting for me. So for me, that's when I feel like I was kind of beginning to transition into this period called midlife. And it felt different.
Okay. So you didn't do the book then?
I didn't. So what
Obviously.
happened?
Yeah,
It's
no,
really
I'm just
funny.
curious because that's a chunk of time when you started doing it. Like, what was it when you realized, like,
Yeah.
oh, this is the right time to do this now?
Yeah. Well, okay. So what happened was I again, 35, I'm sort of looking around and there were a lot of topics that I was kind of struggling with. So I started to write them down and I had this book idea structure and I knew I wanted my stories and other women's stories and experts. And do you remember those old file folders? You could, yeah. So I put all of my book ideas into a red one. And that folder promptly was buried, like both figuratively and literally. And so a lot of life was lived by me in a 20-year period. And so in December of 24, I found the folder. And I was clearing out, I retired, so I was clearing out a really small pile on my desk, and I found the folder. And I opened it, and I thought, well, look at this. Some of the things that I was confused about then, I sort of got to the other side on, so I have a different perspective. Some of the topics I'm still feeling. And by the way, I have a whole host of new ones that I hadn't even contemplated 20 years ago. So I gave myself a couple months in finding this folder and sort of asked myself, the same questions I probably did my whole life. Who am I to think I could write a book? And this is silly, and you're not a writer. But the good news is at this age, those thought patterns get short-circuited a lot. So I made the decision that I was going to write the book. And that's what I did.
Good for you. Do you find when you looked back at it, like I find sometimes when I look back at even old journals, where it's funny that some of the stuff, it's like you're saying, like there are things that like, oh my gosh, I was so worried about that and I didn't need to. Or there's a continuation, there's a thread that's still in my life now.
That's it. and both of those things were true. I think that in some cases, I do, in reflecting back, and really thinking about my 30s and my 40s. My 40s were so far the decade of the most change for me. But when I go back, there were a lot of things that I worried about or became fixated on that I probably didn't need to, but I didn't know any better at the time. So that's kind of one thread. The other thread is, just take menopause, perimenopause. 20 years ago when I noticed, and I was, I think, on the younger side of a lot of these transitions, I didn't know what perimenopause was. So that wasn't a word 20 years ago for me that was in my vernacular. And so I was noticing these changes, but not having a frame of reference to sort of apply them to. So that was definitely a reflection back. Like, man, I just didn't have the language. And I didn't even know the questions to ask my doctor or the signs to look for. And then there are other things, though, to your point, that were very common threads. And those were a lot of the things that I heard echoed in a lot of the women that I spoke to, that sort of became the perspective through which I lived a lot of my life. And it was around these concepts of being the people pleaser, being the peacekeeper, being the one who was capable and unflappable and steady. And those things showed up in my career. Those things showed up in my family life and my relationships, how I parent. But I also think that those were the things that kept me very quiet and very small and sort of softened my voice. And so those threads, as I was writing this book, you can almost see it from a different vantage point. It was like, man, they run deep.
They do. They do. And I think some of it sometimes we carry with us. It's ancestral too, right?
I mean, and the stories are layered. They're hardwired into us. They're modeled for us.
Yeah.
And in my case in particular, they're not just stories that I created about me. They're stories that other people created about me that somehow then I adopted as my own. And so it was sort of like untangling some of these things, which was what I did in the process of writing the book. And what I heard a lot of women in our age bracket are sort of doing for themselves. So those threads, though, were very consistent. Okay. And I could see them.
Yeah. One of the things that you talk about that really resonated with me is you talk about midlife isn't a crisis, that it's an awakening. And I loved that because I think that often as women, when things aren't going right or things are stressful or we're feeling uncomfortable, we think there's something wrong with us, that we need to be fixed. We need to figure this out. And I think that when we go through those times, it's an opportunity to go, well, why am I feeling this? Instead of trying to fix it, what am I not in alignment with my truth? Am I happy? And can you talk a bit about that? Because I think that's really powerful for women to understand that it's not a crisis, that it is an awakening to something far deeper.
I totally agree with you. And the phrase that you opened this conversation with was one that was very pervasive for us as we were growing up, that midlife became something of a crisis. It became this period of selfishness, and there was a lot of negative connotations there. But I do agree with you. I think, and the way I've experienced it now, and I'm seeing so many women, not just my age, but in decades to come, who are experiencing this slightly differently. And I think that a lot of the signs, though, are there. And I think what midlife brings is this ability to sort of quiet some of the chaos that's around us, right? Our lives become a little more steady. For those of us who are parents, maybe the kids, the noise of the busy household shifts a little bit. We become a little bit more aware of our own self in our own life, and we can start to see the signs. And if I'm honest with you, those signs were there for me earlier. Those signs look like, and I'll speak from my own perspective, there were parts of my life that didn't feel like mine. There were parts of me that I didn't recognize. And I felt...
Do you mind giving an example of that?
Yeah, like, I remember in my marriage in particular, I was the emotional regulator. I was the emotional infrastructure. I provided that emotional infrastructure. And in doing that, the things I love to do, or the fact that, I had desires or things that I wanted that I never felt I could put first on the list, because God help me, if I did that, it meant everybody around me would suffer. And so, things that I really liked about myself, I always really prided myself on being confident and being bold and having an opinion and not being fearful of sharing that. As I got older, I found myself quieting those things.
Really?
I found myself kind of like stepping back a little bit from my opinions and my desires, because I felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. And if I started to do these things, everything, this infrastructure that I built was just going to crumble. And so these things that I actually really liked about myself became things I couldn't even recognize anymore. And, that clarity only came when I was able to quiet some of this stuff.
Yeah.
It was not something that I could see. And if I'm honest with you, though, looking back, the signs were there. But when you take those signs and then you weave them intricately into these stories of people pleaser and capable one and the one that has to hold everything together, it becomes almost impossible to untangle them, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And you talk about that. You talk about unlearning so many of the expectations, that have been placed upon us. And I think the people pleasing is a huge one for women. It's something that we really struggle with. And even, I know that I think you have 3 kids.
I have 3 boys, and then my partner who lives in Australia, he has another 4. So together we have a staggering number of children.
Yeah. But it is like, I think also too, when you throw the mom in there also, it's like we put everybody before us. I don't know how many times I'm like, okay, I'm going to go do this. And then one of my kids would have been like, Mom, I need this. And I'm like, okay. And I just, where my husband, and God love him, that he would be like, well, I'm going to finish this first. And I always admired that he was able to do that. But I do think it's like, what can we start to do to shift away from being the people pleaser and know that that it's okay to say no, or it's okay to say I need time for myself, because it's a really hard thing for women to do.
Yeah. Well, I think, the phrase that I love that you talked about was this notion of unlearning, right? We have to, and if you think about where we sit now in our 50s, 60s, or, whatever period we're on, it's decades of learning.
Yes.
And decades of expectations about beauty, about motherhood, partnership, being the good girl, being the quiet one, being the steady, unflappable one. And there are, if you kind of can take a step back from that, there are some kind of core beliefs that sort of run through a lot of these things. And I saw them sort of echoed in not only my own reflections, but also those of women who so graciously shared their stories with me. They're rooted in concepts like somehow we're not enough just as we are.
Yeah.
That saying no requires some explanation or permission or an essay or a dissertation, when no is actually a complete sentence.
Yes.
And that the big one for me was that somehow I became trained to believe that I was existing to make everybody else around me comfortable.
Yeah.
That I was responsible for that. And so those are, deeply rooted beliefs that do surface. And it is kind of an unlearning of those things. And they are set in these expectations, whether they're expectations that we set for ourselves, expectations that were modeled for us, or those that were just hardwired into us, from early childhood.
I want to circle back to something you said earlier. You talked about rest and slowing down. And that is something that I think I would say that's my lesson the last year that I have learned. I never felt that, oh, I couldn't rest because I'd feel guilty. I just felt like I was always on autopilot. But I think the rest is so important, and especially for women, with our health, and whether women are in menopause or out of menopause, and just, the cortisol, like it's for everything, the rest. It's for,
Right.
our body, our health, our heart health physically. But I also even think spiritually, it's really important because often I found when I would go through things, I would try to figure it out. And I'm like, okay, how can I correct this? How can I figure it out? And I found through another word for rest for me was allowing. Like I got into a place like, I am just going to allow this to unfold. I'm not going to try to control it. I'm just going to let it unfold and the answer will come. I don't have to push it. But that allowing also felt like rest to me.
Yeah. Rest is a big one, right? Because if I go back and I look at my 30s and my 40s in particular, the idea of asking for rest or indicating like I need a break, I was tired, in my mind, the way I was wired with some of these beliefs that I held, some of the stories that I sort of wove about myself, the idea of asking for rest somehow was a weakness. It was a sign to me that I was weak or I was lazy or I was insufficient, which is so warped.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but I like I believe that. And now that I say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous. So had I even been smart enough at the time to just even say these things out loud in an empty room to myself, I think I would have caught myself kind of going, wait a second. This is like, just catch yourself here. But I think for a lot of us women, especially women who are high performers and drive, and they are the emotional, spiritual, mental, physical rocks of their environments. The idea of rest it's not far. It's not a too far of a bridge to cross to go, that must mean I'm weak or I'm lazy or I'm this or I'm that. But I do think that, again, it's almost like saying, no, I need a break. That's 4 words, right?
Yeah.
It's 4 words.
Yeah.
And that's a full sentence. I need a break. I need
Yeah.
to rest. That's full. And I think the other thing I want to comment on, which is what you said, is in the rest or this concept of, sort of allowing. For me, with rest, whether that's physical, actual, just like I need to go lie down or I need to sleep or whatever it is,
Yeah.
or just an emotional pause, it allows me to bring clarity to what I'm seeing, and also to tap into what am I feeling? What do I need right now? It quiets my nervous system so that I can pay attention to the thing that's actually happening for me. And then the step I've learned to take, which is like one step past that, is, again, even if it's in an empty room, saying the thing you need or you feel out loud, even if it's just to myself, because that verbalizing something out loud. And again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a life coach.
Yeah.
But I've learned that the act of saying something out loud changes the thought pattern in your brain.
Yes.
It interrupts it. So if you're used to kind of thinking away, you're programmed to think away, when you say something out loud, again, even if it's to yourself in an empty room, it interrupts the thought pattern.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I do that often. I put because now we've all got AirPods. I put my AirPods on when I go for a walk, and I just talk to myself because people think I'm on the phone, right? It's like you got the AirPods, but I will actually just talk to myself and work through things in my head, just talking to myself, like getting it out, because otherwise I find like it's that hamster on a wheel,
Absolutely. And the biology, the chemistry, with the act of saying something out loud, the fact that it interrupts a thought pattern that may be ingrained in us. And then when you interrupt a thought pattern, often actions follow, which is really powerful.
My favorite, I think, part of your book is when you talk about aging and beauty and visibility and worth. And I think now more than ever, it is something that I think women are really struggling with. And that whole idea of having to be perfect, having to, you're 55, I'm 60, and that, if you have wrinkles or gray hair or your body is in a shape that we're failing in some sort of a way. And even I was saying to my husband the other day, when you look at commercials on TV or when you see ads, it's always women that like buy this cream to get rid of your wrinkles. And we don't see that for men. Right?
No,
Like we just don't.
no.
Like it's all targeted towards women. And I would just love you to sort of expand on that chapter in your book, because I
Yeah.
found it really powerful.
Yeah. I think it's a really important, sort of observation in terms of, the expectations that we often put on ourselves, but society puts on us in terms of how we're supposed to show up, how we're supposed to age, how we're supposed to care for ourselves, and how palatable, and that palatable, palatability is not just like in our, our mindset and our personality, but it's also in our appearance. Like somehow we're expected to show up looking a certain way and like being acceptable to people around us. So I think that's a really important expectation that we have to confront and then decide for each of us, what are we going to buy into and what are we going to let go of? And
Yeah.
that's a personal decision, right? Like I don't want, whatever things that I feel for me, not for anybody else, but for me that I am unhappy with, or I want to preserve, or I want to tweak or take care of, I'm going to do those things for me, not because there's some external expectation on how I need to show up physically at this age. But I do think in that, though, is this concept of grief, right? Because what happens? First of all, we can grieve a lot of things. We can grieve people that we lose, for sure.
Yeah.
We can grieve identities that shift, relationships that end. Our appearance is an identity that changes. We can grieve the idea of who we thought we were going to be at a certain point, or the kind of life we thought we were going to be living, or how we were going to look.
Yeah.
And it's okay to feel sadness and confusion and anger about where we sit. And I think the hard part is when we don't acknowledge that that is a feeling that we have, because then you can't move to acceptance, right? And
Yes.
this idea that somehow change or different is somehow a failure. Like we carry all these things with us. And when we carry these things, it comes guilt and shame and embarrassment and fear and everything else. But I do think that, acknowledging, and if you sit in a place that says, hey, I don't look like I used to look. Man, there's some days I walk by a mirror and I might feel 25 until I get a glimpse of myself. I'm like,
Yeah.
she's not 25 anymore. And there are things that bother me about that.
Yeah. No, you're right. I think there's that
yeah.
when I hear a lot of women say it's that for me, and I don't know what it's like for you, but getting older, I feel more youthful than I ever have because I just have this knowing and this energy and this excitement about life. Like what you said at the beginning, like I love getting older. I am so excited by it. And then you see yourself in the mirror or in a photo and you're like, it's almost like the outside doesn't match what you're feeling inside. And there's a little bit of an
Totally.
adjustment with that. And I even find that,
Absolutely.
I forget who said it, but I remember reading that where you look at yourself in the mirror and then all of a sudden you look and you go, oh, I'm getting older, or there's more wrinkles, or there's more, and it's an adjustment period. And then you're fine for another 3 years and then it sort of happens again. But it's in it. And it doesn't mean you're vain. It's just that you're looking at that person and you don't recognize her the way you used to. And you have to sort of, get used to that's the new norm.
It is the new norm. And I do think, I do think that sometimes we women are our own worst critics, right? Not just
Totally.
about ourselves, but the standard we set for other women around us. And
Yeah.
the way I sort of look at it is, if there are things that bother you, and I'll turn it back on myself. If there are things that bother me, or if there are things that I want to preserve, or I want to fix, or I want to correct, I'm going to do those things. Not because somebody's telling me I should, but because I want to do those things to feel better about myself. That doesn't make me a bad person.
No.
It doesn't make me a vain person. It makes me somebody who's very comfortable in her own skin and in a position to and able to tweak the things I want to tweak.
Yes.
And so I think that there is a little bit of power that comes in that, but the expectation is out there.
Yeah.
The criticism for sure is out there.
Yeah.
And there is that sort of awareness process it can be jarring,
Yes.
right? When you are used to seeing a certain version of yourself, and as you age, those things look different. Like I know that I have felt a sense of grief and loss over, again, nothing tragic, but like, man, I used to love how flat my stomach was, or I used to, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's like, it's okay to feel sad about the fact
Yeah.
that I feel bad about those things, but also I feel really proud that this belly housed 3 humans. Like, okay, she did a good job.
Yeah.
It's funny because as I was writing the book, I also started writing a blog. And one of the first blogs I wrote was a love letter to my boobs. And if you're a fan of Judy Blume, like I was, I just felt like she was such a seminal writer. The letter and the blog I wrote was like, "Are you there, boobs? It's me, Angela." Because I was really critical of a lot of parts of my body, right? And I remember in 8th grade, some boy told me my butt was flat, and like that stupid little comment lived in my head for a long time.
Yeah.
But the relationship that I had with my boobs in particular, and my legs or whatever. And then as I wrote this blog, I became acutely aware of, yes, these things look different. Yes, they may not look like everybody else's, but man, you know what? Those legs did a lot of things.
Yeah.
Those legs carried this body with strength through hard periods of time. They helped me bring 3 lives into this world. They walked me into a mediator's office when I and my ex-husband made the decision that we were going to divorce.
Yeah.
This body carried me through a lot of things, so I could mourn.
You show up more
changes.
grace. Yeah.
But I have to show myself grace.
Yeah.
And I also don't feel compelled to have to justify
Yeah.
what I do or what I don't do to anybody. And that's a different place, because again, it's just like no, right? No's a full sentence. But for me, I was modeled to, oh, well, I can't do this thing because, I'd have to write a dissertation. I don't feel that same compulsion to have to justify anything anymore.
I'm in Toronto, and there's a museum here called the ROM. It's the Royal Ontario Museum. And a few years ago, I went to see an exhibit. It was all on breast cancer, and all the pieces of art were from breast cancer survivors. And there was one little frame on the wall that I walked to, and it was a letter that this survivor had written. And she talked about how her whole life she complained about her breasts, how much she hated them, how much she wished they were smaller, how much, you name it, she said it about it. And then she said, and then I get cancer, and where does it go? To the thing that I hate the most, the thing that I poured so much negative thoughts and energy into. And I'll never forget that. I just was like, wow, the things that we say to our bodies that we would never say to somebody else, we would never say to our kids. And I think sometimes too that when I start picking myself apart, when I look in the mirror, or we do like all these little things.
Yes.
If I'm feeling really good about myself, I don't really think about my appearance like that. But it's when I start to not feel good that I start to tear myself down. And so when I start doing that personally, I take a moment to go, okay, what's going on here? Right? Do I need to meditate more? Do I need to go out with some girlfriends? Do I need to have my husband? Like whatever it is. But I feel that how we look is also how we are feeling on the inside.
Of course. I think that, that's such a great story. And it is so important. And I think that you even just identified the thing that happens for us in midlife. It's like we become acutely aware. And we look for signs and signals, and then we take action. That ability to just stop and go, hey, I know that when I get overcritical with myself, it means I've got to stop and I've got to figure out what is happening for me and what do I need.
Yeah.
Because this behavior is not normal for me. But I can relate to being in my 20s and 30s and early 40s where I wouldn't even give myself the space to be able to take that pause.
Yes.
I didn't even have the awareness or the fortitude to just sort of go like, hey, something in me is bubbling, because God forbid if I stopped.
Yeah.
God forbid if I just like put myself on the list first.
Yeah.
Because then the whole system breaks down like that, and that's a really dangerous fallacy.
Yeah. And I love when you touched upon the grief that obviously there's the grief of, our parents and people that we love. There's the, that are leaving this world. There's that grief. But then even the grief of, your children maybe are leaving home and they don't need you as much. Or, excuse me, I even know for me that I'm at this point in my life that there are some dreams that I have that I realize I might not get to do those this time around.
Totally.
And it makes me a little sad. It makes me a little teary-eyed. But
Yeah.
there is a grieving process, absolutely. And I would love if you could sort of articulate that a little bit more, because I think that's really important that we honor that also.
You're so right. And there is a lot to be said for, how do we navigate any grief that comes out without feeling like we're failing? And I think it starts with just acknowledging the feeling or what's happening, because that acknowledgement moves us a little bit quicker to acceptance. And I think it's also this belief that somehow change or loss or anything being different is somehow a failure. And I know I could be guilty of that, right? Like I was probably guilty of that in my younger decades, because different just meant failure. Grief it was a change, it was negative, and then with that comes fear and shame and embarrassment and all these kind of negative and really heavy emotions. And I believe that if we can move from acknowledgement to acceptance, that allows us to shift toward the knowledge that grief or change is not a failure. It is just different. And then when we can kind of get our mind in that place, that helps us take the next action, or really any action. Even the smallest step is movement towards something else, right? And I really believe that sometimes different is just different.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's change. And there are really good things that can come on the other side of that.
Yeah.
There are really good things that come from change and from different. But it is moving from that place of, hey, I'm acknowledging it. Something's happening for me. What is it?
Yes.
Because once I do that, I can move to acceptance.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that's why, you talk a lot also about, friendships and community and the women in our lives. And, even me doing this podcast and you writing this book, is that I feel now more than ever, like community is so important. And I love my husband. I love my boys. But what I have with my girlfriends, it's just a whole other level. It's spiritual. I always say that. It's like it's a spiritual connection that I have. Like I was speaking to my girlfriend Di today on the phone, and I think we were on the phone for an hour and a half just talking, and she was doing editing and I'm doing editing, and it's just, I don't know, there's just something really magical about that. But it's also such an important thing as we grow older that we have that. So can you share a little bit about that, the importance of that?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And, if I go back again to my kind of 30s, early 40s, my life was so busy. I think that my friendships, the time, the actual physical time I spent with girlfriends became almost non-existent because life just got so busy. And I am at this place now where, like you, it's almost a physical need. Like I know that I start to feel a little angsty or staticky in myself. And usually the first thing I ask is, okay, am I hungry? Am I tired? Am I, what can I control? And then the next place is, I think I need a girlfriend.
Yeah.
I just need girlfriend time. So I think that this real connection, physical, spiritual, commonalities, and something that these friendships and relationships give us that we don't get from any other place.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get it from any other place. Like there's like a biological need that I feel now. So I'm prioritizing this time with friends almost above a lot of other things right now. And I am very unapologetic about it. I just want to also point out, I don't care if it feels like I'm going on, play dates. I need them and I'm going to do them.
Yeah.
And I think too, the other thing that is kind of the flip side to this equation that I've seen happen with some women is their relationships are changing, right? So women, friends who they thought were really close friends might have been seasonal or situational. So now we're in this place where some of us are having to rebuild or reestablish our sense of community and relationships. And they might look different. And I think, one of the ways that shows up is just in this recognition that, maybe there are relationships that served a season, but may no longer kind of fit. And that's okay.
I love that you said that. I think that's really important because we do, we're not the same as we were, when we were younger. And it doesn't mean that there has to be something wrong. It doesn't have to mean that that person has done something. It could just be that you have, I love that term soul contracts. It's like they were in your life for a certain amount of time and maybe you've just outgrown each other. And it doesn't mean that you won't find each other again, but like you said, for this season. And I always think of it if I have something where a friend, we're no longer close, that it's like, okay, it's just making space for something else that's supposed to come into my life.
Absolutely. And I think it's having that perspective, being aware of and coming at it with an expansive view, not this is a change, this is a failure, I've done something wrong, this relationship is broken, it's never going to come. It's more of an expansive, open, accepting frame of reference. And the other thing that I found, and I think I found it more reinforced through the writing of this book, is a little bit of that law of attraction. I feel like the more I've put myself out, the more conversations that I'm instigating on subjects that are funny, serious, a little unhinged, probably not totally G-rated, the more people and the more I'm attracting people and spirits and conversations that are coming back to me. So it's like my village actually looks a little bit different, but it's bigger in a lot of ways than I ever could have fathomed because of this kind of law of attraction that I think is happening here.
Yeah. So talk to me about, there's a lot of not negativity, but there's a lot of, like, when we say crisis when it comes to midlife for women, and but what are some of the beautiful gems that come with midlife?
Oh man. Well, I just need to tell you one that's not so beautiful. So I've been in menopause since I was 47. So a long time, but I'm now dealing with like a new wave of symptoms. This new wave is coming with it dryness, and my nose is consistently dry and itchy all the time.
Really?
So I just want to, it's so bizarre. It's so bizarre.
So you're the opposite. I'm that person where my nose is always like, I have a Kleenex here. My nose is always running.
I am not there yet. My nose is constantly like dry and just itchy. So anyway, you'll have to forgive me for like itching my nose because it's like perpetual. But some of the beautiful things that I think have emerged out of this that I have felt, I've seen women sort of express through the writing of the book, are things like just, what is it? You give fewer Fs?
Yeah.
So with the exhaustion comes a whole lot less like focus on things that actually don't matter.
Yes.
And this embracing of that. So that's been really, really liberating and like freeing. I think the just the overall comfort that I have in things like saying no. I'm not available. That's 3 words.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't owe you a reason.
Yeah.
I don't need to ask for permission. I don't need to apologize. I'm not available. I need a break. 4 words. I don't agree. 3 words. So there's this definitely sense, and I don't know if it's like this sense of self. I kind of write about this concept of like radical self-possession. It's like we become very aware of who we are, what we want, what we desire, where we put that on the list, and very comfortable with possessing those things. Not at the expense of other people, not to keep everybody around us, happy and solid, and, so there's something very liberating, and I feel very powerful in that.
I agree.
And it's very unapologetic. I've got to tell you, like, I don't feel bad.
Good. And you shouldn't.
I don't.
You shouldn't. Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of beauty in that.
I think so too.
And I think
There's a lot of freedom. There's a lot of freedom in it.
there is a lot of freedom in it. And I think the other thing that has emerged for me, and one of my favorite stories in the book is, I call her our oldest real girl. Her name is Diane Heiler. She's an author. Not only did she share her story, but she herself has written a book about grief. So the story that I capture in the book is really about, how she processed grief. She lost her second husband when she was in her late 70s. She wrote her first book through that process. She was not a writer before, but had the courage and the capacity to key into this grieving process and the bravery to write a book. She went on to find love again. And one of the last questions I asked her was, what's been the most surprising thing about finding love in your 80s? And basically she said that the parts still work and I like it. And so with that came this concept for me of, if I have a desire, if I have a want, if I want to do something, if I have the desire to do something, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to embrace what comes with it. And so, there's a lot of people who maybe get to their 60s or 70s or 80s and go, I don't really have an interest in that. Cool. Like, you do you. But man, if you want it and you desire it, make it so.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah. So what's next for you? You've done this book. Are you going to do retreats? Are you going to write another book? Like what do you see growing through this?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. I don't know. Right now I'm working on a companion piece to this book though, that's a little bit more interactive and a little bit more, kind of like, I think it's going to be something that somebody could pick up without having read my book, but just to get in and start getting hands-on and to start practicing some of the things that we're talking about. Yeah. I just delivered my very first corporate workshop on a G-rated theme from this book that has to do with this concept of who put me in charge of everything and this invisible load that we as women often carry, and how it shows up in our leadership style, how it shows up in our career decisions, how it shows up at work and spills over into our personal life, and how these things kind of mesh together, and how can we be a lot smarter about identifying those things, arresting them in the moment to become more effective leaders, to become more effective career women, to become more effective just humans in general. So that's been really fun. And second book, like I have a couple of ideas, but I'm not quite
not sure yet.
Not sure yet, but I do still write for my Substack, which I love. I write about 2 or 3 pieces a week. And,
good for you.
So that's kind of what's next.
I always love to offer my guests at the end of the episode, is there anything that you feel in your heart or your soul that you would just like to share with the listeners?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I think especially for no matter, if we're sitting here in our 50s or 60s or beyond, or even if we're sitting in our 30s, in the times where you feel like you may be falling apart, you're not.
Yeah.
In the times where you feel like you're not enough, you are. In the times where you might be feeling, I must be the only one, you're not alone. Yeah. And I think the other thing that you mentioned earlier, which is, because I get asked a lot, like, what do you wish you would have known in your 30s and 40s? And I think one of the things I wish I would have known, in addition to that list, is your body's going to change a lot quicker than your mind. So be ready. Be ready, because that body's going to change. And I wish I would have known a little bit sooner. And it's not a crisis.
Yes.
These things are not a crisis.
Not a crisis. And I always think of Jane Fonda in her book Prime Time, that if you can look ahead, like, who do you want to be in your 70s? Like, that's what I think of now, or 80s. It's what we do now.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah. But, Angela, I thank you so much for writing this book. I think it's magnificent. I thank you for being here and trying to change the conversation for women, and trying to elevate women and help us feel better about ourselves as we age, I think is such importance in this world. And I'm so glad that you are doing that. So I thank you for that.
Well, I thank you for having me. And thank you for giving space for these conversations. And your listeners are really lucky that you're here.
Aw, thank you. It's very kind of you. Yeah. And to the listeners, I encourage you to check out Angela's book. I think we're in Canada. I found your book on Amazon, but you can probably, that's the easiest place to get it. Or do you have a website, Angela, where people can go to also?
I do. realgirlsguide.com. You could buy it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You could buy it directly from me, whatever is easier for you.
So I'll make sure to put that in the show notes. And please let us know what you do next, because I'd love to have you back. And yeah. And to the listeners, I thank you. I thank you for showing up. I thank you for being a part of this. And as always, I'm sending you love. And thank you for being here with me. Lots of love.